So thank you, Andre, and welcome to the participants. We have a small group, but as you know, where 2 or 3 are gathered can be a special place, even if it's a virtual gathering. I think this theme of the Book of Revelation is a very deep one. I know there's a fellow in Germany who has been responsible for doing work on, I guess it's called the anthroposophical version of Wikipedia over there. He's been giving presentations on the Book of Revelation for several years running. And so it's a very deep subject. I don't intend to, continue endlessly with this topic, but I think there's more to work with to deepen it. And I wanted to kind of revisit a theme that we dealt with not so long ago on the 30th of March, Rudolf Steiner's 100th anniversary of his passing into the spiritual world. So I wanted to kind of focus on this development without spending a lot of time on it. I have in this slide also Ita Wegman and Marie Steiner, both of whom played a very important role in his destiny. Marie Steiner, especially during the early period when he became the chairman of the Anthroposophical Society in Germany in 1902. She was very much a part of that new phase of his biography. And with Ita Wegman, it was in the later years, one of the few people with whom he actually collaborated in writing the book on medical work. And I think one of the experiences one can have as one delves into Rudolf Steiner's biography is that towards the end, there's kind of a tragic element that enters. And that has to do with the burning of the Goetheanum, which very much impacted his health. But I want to start by hearkening back to his earlier years. An important time was when he was asked to edit Rudolf Steiner's or edit Goethe's scientific works. And it was Professor Carl Julius Schroer, or Schroer, who was instrumental in helping him to get that position at the young age of 21. And not long after that, he, in one of his earliest works, wrote the following words: becoming aware of the idea within reality is the true communion of man, or of the human being. And this is kind of a red thread that runs through Rudolf Steiner's biography. It's very much there in his philosophy of freedom, for example. And I have here sort of a bit of a overview of some of the stages in his biography that have to do with his early child experience, for example, where he had early clairvoyant experience at the age of 7, that I won't go into these things in detail. And then he gets deeply enthusiastic about geometry around the age of 8. And then he starts his studies on Kant at age 14, which is kind of precocious, not what 14-year-olds generally do. And then he meets this herb gatherer, Felix Kaguski, in 1879. That's when he was going to the Technical University in Vienna, and he would meet him on the train. And Rudolf Steiner would later share with, and it's recorded in the Bar document, which has to do with a sort of esoteric biography that he shared with Edward Schuré, the author of The Great Initiates, among other writings. And he was a close friend of Marie Steiner and played a role in mystery drama that was enacted during the Munich conference and helped to get Steiner into creating his own mystery plays. That through this herb gatherer, Christian Rosenkreuz was working, who was one of his 2 masters. And the fact that this occurred in 1879 was when the age of Michael began, is kind of a signature in Rudolf Steiner's biography. And then we have the meeting with the master. That's also in 1879 at the age of 19. So there was a point where questions that he would bring to this herb gatherer reached a limit to where the herb gatherer wasn't able to answer his questions. And he then introduced him to this other individual who's somewhat shrouded in mystery. We don't have a specific name, as we do with the herb gatherer. Friedrich Nietzsche, fighter against his time.
Florian, excuse me. So you was frozen like for 40 seconds or so.
Okay.
Your computer, well, can you just repeat what you
Yeah,
were
so his Truth and Science, he wrote in 1891, Philosophy of Freedom in 1894. And then he gave a talk on Friedrich Nietzsche to a group of people among whom were members of a Theosophical Society. And he was invited back, and he then gave his first esoteric lecture in 1899 on the theme of Goethe's fairy tale. And Steiner would later say that this fairy tale was the germinal seed out of which anthroposophy was born. So that's a significant disclosure. There's other things about these different periods, like the Vienna period from age 20 to 30, the Weimar periods from 30 to 40, and then the Berlin period from age 40 to 46. That's from 1901 to 1907. That's when his theosophical work began in 1902. And the fact that he gave that esoteric lecture on Goethe's Secret Revelation in 1899 is also significant, because that was the dawn of the new age of light, sort of 1900, the end of the Kali Yuga. So that Steiner, one could say, was very much aligned to the Michael being. And below here have some of his written work, but I won't go into that here. And we know that Goethe was a very important influence on Rudolf Steiner that led him to call the Goetheanum, the new structure where it was meant to be the home of anthroposophy, where the artist and the scientist would build a bridge like Goethe did in his own work. And Goethe's relationship to Schiller was kind of instrumental for Rudolf Steiner in the founding of the Waldorf movement. So there's a great deal to be learned from Goethe as a human being, as a modern human being who represents the consciousness soul. And this truth and beauty complementing each other and then flowing into the will. And this is, of course, expressed in his Faust, especially the second part, where he deals with the mystery of good and evil, although he wasn't able to differentiate between Lucifer and Ahriman as yet. He nevertheless showed how there is this redemption of evil, as opposed to this polarization and a kind of unbridgeable chasm between good and evil. That's part of our task, is to redeem, to begin with Lucifer. So the Goetheanum, of course, again, relates to the fact that recently we've had, aside from this commemoration of Rudolf Steiner's death not long ago this year, there's the tragedy that struck deeply into Rudolf Steiner's biography, having to do with the tragic burning of the Goetheanum, which began on New Year's Day in 1922-23, actually. And that this deeply impacted Rudolf Steiner's health. And I think this is one of the things we need to look at in terms of the biography, a collective biography of the anthroposophical society as a whole, that Rudolf Steiner's life was cut short. He made a valiant effort the following end of 2023, leading over to 1924. And that had to do with an effort to renew the society. And during that Christmas conference, the foundation stone, which had been laid in the ground in 1913 in September, was now metamorphosed into the foundation stone mantram, which is of central significance to anthroposophy. And you could say meeting the apocalyptic times that we live in, because part of it is crossing the threshold where the three parts of our being separate: thinking, feeling, and willing. And the foundation stone meditation provides us with a way of attuning our moral compass to sort of the archetypal relationship that our thinking, feeling, and willing have to the Holy Spirit, the Son aspect of the divinity, and the Father aspect of the divinity. And therefore, it's something to work with and deepen over time to navigate the turbulent history that we're passing through at this time. So aside from this meditation, the new impulse involved Rudolf Steiner introducing Vorstand members who were then called to share the leadership of the Anthroposophical Society with him. And these included, again, Marie Steiner, Ita Wegman, and also Günther Wachsmuth, Albert Stephan, and Elizabeth Vrede. He had intended also, he had hoped to be able to invite Edith Marian to join this Vorstand, but she was very deeply struck by the burning of the Goetheanum and suffered ill health and never recovered. So she was not able to join the Vorstand. Now, on the Christmas Eve of 1923, which was the day before the first real events, the evening before the Christmas conference got underway, Rudolf Steiner gave a presentation, the first of a series of lectures having to do with the evolution of humanity in the light of anthroposophy, world history in the light of anthroposophy. And in that first lecture, he speaks about how the ancient Indians experienced the human head in relationship to the whole earth, and that where the head opens up downward to the heart, they experience the earth turn to the sun. And so this, I think, is very relevant to our time, because this Goetheanum, when you create a cross section of it, as in this drawing below here, there's a relationship between the human head and the cerebellum aspect of the human head. And where the podium was situated is related to where the pineal gland is located in the head. So there's kind of, just as in Solomon's temple, there were certain secrets embodied in it, so too in the Goetheanum, Rudolf Steiner laid certain secrets, which have to do then with the Goetheanum building a bridge between the microcosmic human being, especially the head, and then the earth in relationship to the solar cosmos. So here again is another version of these 7 seals that I wanted to share, so that we can see that there's many different versions. These were painted by Frederica Luchters, based upon Rudolf Steiner's indications. And there appear in a book published by the Verlag am Goetheanum, in a book called Apocalypse im Ich, Apocalypse in the I. And it involves various contributors, including Vorstand members. It was published not so long ago, but it's not available in English. And this sort of brings us back to that this is something, a theme that we can't sort of arrive at without meditative work. So I brought this up before, quoting Rudolf Steiner. You can see how the whole world presents itself in such seals, and because the magi and initiates have put the whole cosmos into them, they contain a mighty force. You can continually turn back to these seals, and you will find that by meditating on them, they will disclose infinite wisdom. They can have a mighty influence on the soul because they have been created out of cosmic secrets. Hang them in a room where such things are discussed, as we have been doing here, discussions in which one raises oneself to the holy mysteries of the world, and they will prove enlivening and illuminating in the highest degree. So this is a kind of a meditative work. Here Rudolf Steiner speaks of this raising ourselves. When we raise ourselves through meditation to what unites us with the spirit, we quicken something within us that is eternal and unlimited by birth and death. Once we have experienced this eternal part in us, we can no longer doubt its existence. Meditation is thus the way to knowing and beholding the eternal, indestructible, essential center of our being. In another place, he says, just as in the body, eye and ear develop as organs of perception, so does a man develop in himself soul and spiritual organs of perception. So here we take that picture of the Goetheanum a step further, showing that there's a relationship between the Goetheanum and its layout and construction, and the construction layout floor plan of Solomon's temple. That there's a certain relationship between the Holy Holies, the Holy of Holies in Solomon's temple, which was a room that was in the shape of a cube, and it was all gilded in gold. There were no windows. It was in darkness, and only the high priest entered once a year and spoke the secret names of the Yahweh divinity, the I am, the I am. And I've mentioned in other contexts that this Holy of Holies can be seen as the seed out of which the New Jerusalem is born. So this cube metamorphoses into the sort of floor plan, three-dimensionally, of what later is the vision of the New Jerusalem, which is also cubical in its dimensions. And of course, gold is a sun metal. So the fact that there was gold everywhere hidden in that darkness had to do with the fact that this is the future, even though Yahweh being a moon divinity and the Hebrews having a moon calendar, at the beginning, before Abraham, there was the sun initiate who Abraham looked up to. And this was Melchizedek. So at the beginning of the mission of the Jews really stood a sun initiate. And at the end of the mystery of the Jewish Hebrew destiny is really preparing the vehicle, the vessel, the Jesus being who becomes the vessel for the Christ at the age 30 at the baptism. And for 3 years, you then have the Christ living in that vehicle and vessel, and then going through the mystery of Golgotha, and then implanting the new sun mysteries in the earth. Since then, the foundations have been laid for this metamorphosis of this golden cubical space that was hidden. But at the time of the mystery of Golgotha, the veil, the four-colored veil that shrouded this mystery was torn, having to do with the tremors of the earth and the earthquakes. That veil, which represents the four elements of earth, air, water, fire, was torn open. And those mysteries that were hidden in the Holy of Holies were opened. And so that's something that was also playing a role in the foundation plan of the Goetheanum, the first Goetheanum. The stage area really has a certain correspondence with what was the cubical space, the Holy of Holies, in the Solomon's temple. But now it was open to all of those people sitting in that space. It was now the ancient mysteries that were hidden were now meant to come onto the stage of history. And the image below there, the five-pointed star in relation to the entry of Solomon's temple, this has to do with the fifth mystery, the mystery that has to do with the New Jerusalem, the future Jupiter stage that comes after the earth, the future New Jerusalem, the golden city. That was laid as a seed in that temple. And that's why Rudolf Steiner, as I think mentioned the last time, that there is a kind of golden crystal-like star that shines from that area of the earth where Jerusalem is located, surrounded by a blue aura, and that shines into the cosmos as a kind of seed of the future New Jerusalem. And part of our present day tragedy is that that region is war-torn, and hostilities are going on. And a lot of the people who live there haven't embraced the Christ impulse, but are still living in the Old Testament, in the old form of Judaism. So that's part of the tragedy. The Jews were treated very badly in Europe, especially during the Second World War period. And now you have the Jews living in Israel treating the Palestinians very badly. And there's, of course, karma in these kinds of situations, that we have to lift the veil of karma. Everything out of its right timing becomes evil. We're meant to move beyond race and nation. But Lucifer and Ahriman want to propagate and keep those things alive and empowered beyond the right timing. And so this national, ethnic, racial strife that's based on blood and heredity we're meant to move beyond that to a new cosmopolitanism that Michael has ushered in 1879 with his new Michaelic mission, and the Anthroposophical Society is meant to embody that. And there are, of course, Jewish people who are anthroposophists and embrace this Michael impulse. I've been spending some time with works of Josiah Ben Aaron, for example, who has written some quite interesting things about the Book of Revelation and some of the themes we're dealing with here. So it's never black and white, these issues. It's very variegated, this kind of collective karma. So this is an image I've shared many times, but here, again, it has to do with this picture of the earth being related to the human head. Up at the top right, you have a drawing that Rudolf Steiner put on the blackboard, talking about this relationship of the head to the heart on the one hand, and the earth to the sun on the other. And as I've mentioned in other times, that this, of course, was difficult to imagine back in the time when Steiner spoke of this at the Christmas conference, Christmas Eve in 1923. But in our time, when we have the internet, the World Wide Web, as well as the second coming of Christ in the etheric, one can imagine that the earth has two auras. One is the subnature aura, the other is the supernature aura. And that's where the great battle of our time lies. This, on the right there, I'm showing the microcosmic human being, but there's the macrocosmic counterpart. And for this macrocosmic counterpart, doesn't just include those human beings who are incarnated on the earth, but also those that are between death and rebirth. This is kind of the Adam Kadmon that Steiner spoke of, where he often spoke of the sun being related to the human heart on the macrocosmic level. And in relation to the Book of Revelation, we have not only the Christ who descended to the earth from the sun and left his Atman, his highest member, on the sun, but we also have a sun demon whose number is 666. So there's a battle between the Christ and this Antichrist on a cosmic level that appears in the Book of Revelation as the two-horned beast. So you have those human beings who are on this journey between death and rebirth. And Rudolf Steiner tells us that the Copernican picture of the universe only relates to the physical universe. That in terms of the astral experience of the universe, the old Ptolemaic system was true, that the earth is the center, and that when we die and leave the earth, we pass from the earth through the moon sphere and the Mercury sphere and the Venus sphere. And there's, of course, an occult secret here that the initiates reversed Mercury and Venus in order to lead those who were not really going into this deeply enough astray. In alchemy, these were often referred to as the charcoal burners. You know, they were out for creating gold for their physical wealth rather than the true mission of transforming their own physical body into sun nature of the human being, restoring the phantom, as Steiner would call it. So you have these human beings after death going through the moon sphere, which is the Kamaloka period, and then through the Mercury and Venus sphere, and then through the Sun sphere, which leads from lower Devakan to higher Devakan, from the lower heavens to the higher heavens. So all of this Adam Kadmon together is this greater human being that we have to take into account as we go more deeply into the Rosicrucian mysteries, where the fifth stage is the relationship between microcosm, macrocosm. The sixth Rosicrucian stage have to do with expanding into the macrocosm. So that's what we need to do now in order to envision the earth as the macrocosmic head and realize that we're caught between subnature and supernature, between, on the one hand, on the microcosmic level, we have not only a physical, etheric, astral, and ego, our four-membered human being, we're also exposed to electricity, magnetism, gravity, and then radioactivity in our environment is also there in our physical body. And we live in the macrocosm where this dual aspect plays a very big role, especially in our time. And for good reason, Rudolf Steiner chose in his very last letters to the members, which weren't published until after he died, having to do with from nature to subnature. And he warned of the danger of sliding down into the abyss, into subnature, through the relationship to electricity. And so since then, electricity has played a much more powerful role. And there were certain individuals who, aside from those working with anthroposophy, who had a kind of intuitive sense of what they called the emerging new sphere, the emerging global brain, which is now very much more apparent than it was at that time. And this has to do with using the Greek word for thinking, new sphere emerging around the earth. And since then, many authors have written books about this emerging global brain. But there's really two aspects to take into account that wasn't clearly differentiated. Pierre Teilhard de Chardin, I think, was one of those who had certain level of clairvoyance. In my view, he was the same individual who had appeared as Ignatius Loyola, who Rudolf Steiner says later reincarnated as this clairvoyant individual who had a certain level of clairvoyance, but it was leaning towards the physical. And I think that having had a relationship to the founding of the Jesuit order, this same individuality came into a new connection with the Jesuit order as Pierre Teilhard de Chardin. And he envisioned this Christ dimension of this new sphere, that we were kind of heading from the biological development to a future spiritual development. And I take this on my own responsibility. I'm just at this moment not recalling the name of this bridge between the two, but I'll think of it sometime in the next while here. So this emerging nervous system has become much more apparent. And I keep bringing this up because I think this is where a great battle is involved. Just as we had the fall of humanity in the past, Steiner speaks of a second fall, which has to do with the fall of human intelligence. And this is expressed in the book of Revelation in the four horsemen of the apocalypse, which are the first of the seven seals, the first four. And as this seal shows, once you go from the white horse to the red horse, which is a descent into the blood, into the Luciferic temptation, the black horse, Ahrimanic, and the pale horse is really going below the threshold into subnature, that we have to rise up again. And the five-pointed star is the next step, is to lead thinking over into the etheric. When Steiner later spoke about his philosophy of freedom, he spoke of how thinking needed to be led over from the physical brain to the etheric brain, which had been loosening since the 18th or since Greek times, and loosening in the heart since the 18th century. So this loosened etheric body needs to be led over to heart thinking, to the kind of thinking that Goethe embodied in this fairy tale that Steiner said was the seed out of which anthroposophy was born, having to do with moral imaginations and ethical individualism. So we need to find a way back again. The hexagram has to do with the reunion of the human and the divine, and embodying a connection with the sevenfold nature of time, with the seven-pointed star. And there's always a relationship between the different sevens in the book of Revelation. So the seven seals have to do also with the seven trumpets, which are depicted at the top of that seal. So we have to learn to make our thinking flexible, which is what the etheric is. Ahriman tends to harden the etheric, to lead it over into subnature. And this is sort of becoming imprisoned in the skull. And one of the ambitions of Ahriman is to work through what Steiner called the human double. The human double has to leave us at death, but Ahriman's ambition is to not have to leave us at death. And so he helps to inspire transhumanism, posthumanism, as opposed to a new connection to the spiritual. There's a counterfeit spirituality, a counterfeit immortality that Ahriman is striving for. And Rudolf Steiner talked about how libraries can be seen as citadels of Ahriman, but think of what Google has done with creating virtual library, that we can all Google this and that. So we might die, but what's been written by human beings, what's been spoken by human beings, shared by human beings, that's all being scraped up. And AI is now using all of that to generate artificial intelligence that's moving towards AGI and ASI, artificial general intelligence and artificial superintelligence. So Ahriman seeks to use human beings to further his own evolution and to capture the earth. So this is what we're up against. Lucifer was more in the foreground when it comes to the descent of humanity, especially in the Lemurian age is where we encountered the Luciferic. And then Ahriman began in the Atlantean period to play a role. But Ahriman will grow ever stronger because since the middle of the Atlantean, the Earth has moved into the death phase, like at the age of 35 in our human biography, we reach a point where the life forces are reaching a stage of transition where the death forces will become stronger and stronger. And that has to do also with a loosening from the physical, a natural loosening. But instead of that, the Ahrimanic forces want to pull us too deeply into the physical, into this subsensible world below nature. And this has to do with having us identify with the double. Ahriman attacks from below. Ahriman attacks through the feet. And that's where the foot washing that Christ Jesus enacted before the mystery of Golgotha, washing the feet of his disciples to protect us from the subnature forces. As Ahriman seeks to come from below and reach up into the region of the human head, but he can't reach the head if the Christ is there in the human heart. But if the Christ is not there, and if Lucifer is there in our heads, then he can take a hold of that thinking and pull it to serve the lower nature, pull it down to serve the lower nature, serve the instinctual life, and serve this human being who has, instead of the higher ego, identified with these fallen subnature forces that are expressed in this image here, where I'm showing the right side up 5-pointed star and the upside down. The two polarity here that especially in our time, where, as you can see in the upper part of the cosmic evolution, we're moving from the fourth to the fifth stage. And the fifth stage is the New Jerusalem that the Jesus Christ event in the mystery of Golgotha prepared, this future golden city that we're called to co-create. But instead, the Ahrimanic and Luciferic beings, Lucifer's karma is Ahriman, and the Azuric beings also come into play, not to mention the Zorat being, the sun demon, seek to lead us into subnature, which is to create the eighth sphere, which is a counter evolution to the New Jerusalem. And that's the times we live in where the mystery of evil is in the foreground, and electricity is fallen astral forces that remain behind on the old moon. Magnetic forces are fallen sun forces associated with Ahriman, and the Azuric forces are connected with the nuclear forces that have to do with the counterpart to old Saturn. And so we have to deal with this unholy trinity in our time, and they collaborate with each other so that these are very powerful beings, and we can't hope to counter them without the help of Michael, the countenance of Christ. So here we have just sort of a depiction of this descent from the Krita Yuga to the Treta Yuga, the Varpa Yuga, into the Kali Yuga. In Western terms, to talk about the Golden Age, the Silver Age, the Bronze Age, and then the Iron Age. The Kali Yuga began in 3101 BC and ended in 1899. In 1900, we had a new dawning of an age of light that was prepared through Michael taking on the new archangelic leadership in 1879. And he's moving from being an archangel to an archai, which means embracing the entire earth evolution. And so we have the opening by the Christ in the second coming of the realm of Shambhala, which will continue to expand the etheric aura of the earth, which was drawn in during this descent. Now it's expanding again and opening that fairy tale land of imagination so we can experience the aura around the earth and receive the new Christ impulse, which is sort of waiting to be discovered. And Rudolf Steiner speaks of how the reappearance of Christ in the etheric world paradoxically would arise in connection to the mystery of evil by prophetically anticipating that this would begin in 1933. So he then spoke of how in 1933, humanity would have to face the beast that rises from the abyss before humanity could experience the second coming of the Christ in the etheric. And in the apocalyptic lectures to the priests in 1924, not long before he gave his last address, he spoke of that happening in 1933. So we have then this situation where humanity is called to co-create the New Jerusalem. Humanity collectively since the 1840s has been crossing the threshold in connection with what Steiner shared in the priest course as the sounding of the sixth trumpet in the early 1840s. And that at the turn of the millennium, the seventh trumpet would begin to sound, which has to do with then these two imaginations from the book of Revelation. So we've been crossing this threshold since the 1840s. And as is depicted in the 13th chapter, out of the water on the left there in connection with the red pillar related to the inbreathing, the incarnating birth mysteries, we have the dragon with the 7 heads and 10 horns. That's initially depicted in the heavens, but is then cast down to the earth by Michael and rises up out of the astral ocean. And that really gives birth to human thinking. And on the other side, the Boaz pillar, which has to do with the mysteries of death and dying and outbreathing, but also the mysteries of the word, the logos. There you have the beast that has 2 horns that puts himself forward like a ram or a lamb, but speaks like a dragon. And so the question then arises as to how to look at this experience in 1933, where Adolf Hitler came on the scene, that we have the second coming that was seeking to emerge as a new birth in the etheric, a kind of world Christmas that Steiner indicated harkens back to the Atlantean time when the ego was first descending, that the moon, that the sun was seen as having a feminine character at that time in the early stages of the Atlantean period. But at the middle of the Atlantean period, this sun impulse, this masculine impulse, was born out of the sun. And the Christ, as the archetypal ego working through the spirits of form, implanted that ego in human evolution. And then this is kind of being repeated in our time with the 21st century threshold, where Steiner indicated that the sounding of the seventh trumpet. And this is kind of a preview of what will take place at the very end of the earth, when human beings will have to move into the astral sphere and leave the physical behind. And the seven-headed, 10-horned dragon seeks to devour the child, but it's taken up onto the throne. And Michael comes forward and does battle with the dragon and casts him down to the earth. But we have to deal with that dragon. And we hear how the dragon, one of his heads is wounded, but it miraculously heals. And later we hear that the second beast that comes forward out of the dry land, the Ahrimanic beast, in whom also the sun demon is working, whose number is 666. This being is more hidden. He works from the darkness of our unconscious will. And he inspires human beings to create an image of the first beast, and that human beings are called to worship that image of the first beast. And what is that image of the first beast? And I would put forward that this is what the internet, the World Wide Web, the mass of computers that we're all getting hooked into, that allows us actually to have this interchange on this medium. That this image of the beast, it's the Luciferic that awakened our thinking. And as long as our pride and selfishness live in that head, we reject the Christ. And we give birth to a modern science that says we're only physical human beings. So Lucifer then plays into the hands of Ahriman. So Ahriman then inspires human beings to create this image of the beast. And what is the wound? Well, the wound is that human beings, when we fell out of paradise, our astral body was invaded by Lucifer. And this brought about the division of the sexes. We lost our immortality. We fell into the physical world. Paradise was closed to us. And this division of the sexes has to do with the wound. And the women who have to give birth with pain and suffering after that time, we have to work with the sweat of our brow, that bleeding of the menstrual cycle, all have to do with this wound. And it's also repeated in the Grail mysteries with the wound of Amphartas, that has to do with the wound in the sexual region. Some of the Grail stories try to make it sort of, you could say, cleanse it a little of those connotations by talking about how the wound was in the loins. But the actual wording that we find in Eschenbach, that he was wounded in the testicle, and this wound wouldn't heal. And so that wound has to do with the wound of mortality. Now, Ahriman seeks to, through this image of the beast that has to do with the internet, that has to do with the macrocosmic counterpart to the human double. As I said before, Ahriman lives in the doppelganger within the human being, within the subconscious part of our nature. And he has to leave us just before death, but his ambition is not to have to leave us. And so libraries are one of the ways. And of course, with Google, which I showed, Google was founded in 1998, which is the third 666 cycle. It's the great library. The ambition was always to create a global brain. And so now we have that global brain. But we also have humanoid robots coming on the scene. And humanoid robots will have software within them, which in the near future will be software and algorithms that have reached the point of ASI and AGI and ASI, artificial superintelligence. And human beings will be called upon by this Ahrimanic inspiration and this false ambition of eternal life through uploading our consciousness into these humanoid robots that have reached this higher stage. The internet will become the embodiment of the supernature, and Ahriman will inspire us to worship this as a kind of religious focus, a kind of pseudo-religion in a certain respect, because that's really the ambition of the Antichrist, is to take the place of the Christ. And certain secret brotherhoods are working to replace the Christ with another being who is never incarnated, who is an etheric being. And as I see it, this being will actually manifest, be able to incorporate in this future internet that we're building, in these subnature forces, because there's not just a microcosmic double, there's the macrocosmic double. And that's where the sun demon works. And the sun demon works through the Azurus, through Lucifer, and the Ahrimanic forces, the unholy trinity, are arrayed against us. And so we have to wake up to the fact that the mystery of evil is of paramount importance in our time, and that we have this fourfold nature, and that these gravity forces have pulled the astral and etheric too much into a relationship to the physical. That had to happen to wean us of the old connection to the spiritual world. But now we have the opportunity through the expanding etheric body to regain a new natural clairvoyance that begins to dawn with this emergence of Shambhala since 1899 through the second coming of Christ in the etheric. But as we cross the threshold, thinking, feeling, and willing separate, and Lucifer attacks from above, Ahriman from below, as the sculptural group shows, that was meant to be the center of the Goetheanum. We have this division of the personality that we have to now harmonize, and the higher self is hidden behind that. We have to redeem the double. We have to transform the double. But there's not only the individual double, there's the collective double. So earlier on the upper picture, in the earlier stages of evolution, human beings were open to the heavenly world, the spiritual world. We experienced it, but we weren't free. In order to become free, we had to descend deeper and deeper into the physical until we reach this consciousness soul age, where the old puppet strings that connected us with the gods in the old way were cut. Modern science helped to usher in that age and cut those puppet strings, which are the basis of human freedom. So as shown on the bottom section, we've moved from this period in the Atlantean times when we were open to the spiritual world, but we were unfree. And then we moved to the post-Atlantean, where we drew into the physical. Then around the time of the mystery of Golgotha, we descended to the physical plane in the Greco-Latin period. And since then, part of humanity has been descending into the abyss. And it's our thinking that can be oriented upward. And this is the decisive thing, the spiritualization of thinking. This picture of the woman standing on the moon, crowned with the stars and clothed with the sun. The dragon sends out a flood after the woman after it's been cast down. The woman has to share our destiny in the wilderness of the earth. The dragon sends out a flood. The earth takes it up, but not without polluting the lower astral world. And that's social media. That's all the pictures that are coming at us through 1001 screens. And we need to spiritualize human intelligence to rise above this polluted astrality. And those are the wings of the eagle that are given to the woman, to the higher soul that we need. And the tendency is for in a female incarnation to be looser in the physical, reach into the supernature realm, where the etheric begins, but the male tendency is to overshoot in a downward direction. That's why it's at the Royal Society, it was all men who launched the scientific revolution. And you can see in the present situation in America, where the double is strongest on the planet, where one expects the incarnation of Ahriman, that it's the male gender that especially tends to succumb to the doppelganger. And the doppelganger is especially strong where the north-south mountain ranges are on the west coast, because the magnetic forces associated with Ahriman are very strong in those mountain ranges due to the metallic ores there, the iron ores, which relates to the Mars forces. And it's no accident that Silicon Valley is located there, that Hollywood is located there, that Gates started his Microsoft along that same area, and that these influences have been spreading across the planet. And behind this recent presidency, I showed the last time how these billionaires who have gained their millions through these platforms that are really offshoots of the spring Silicon Valley impulse dominate globally on the level of the internet, search engines, etc. Elon Musk, Amazon buying and selling, Zuckerberg with his impulse towards virtual reality, wants us all to put on these goggles and enter the virtual world and have avatars. And you can have somebody die and they'll come back to life with their memories and the like in this virtual world. But more and more, they want us to transition into that world, which is really a superhighway into the eighth sphere, where human relationships will more and more become involved in this realm of virtual reality. Already, Zuckerberg is telling us, well, there's so many lonely people, So let's give them bots to relate to. Let's give them bots to have romantic relationships with them. And where does that lead? And eventually we'll have not just the brothel sex robots, but we'll have the humanoid robots who can relate to us on that physical plane and embody this super intelligence like gods in our midst. And so Ahriman is very much of a presence in our time having to do with this mystery of evil. And America is the place where Ahriman is able to work more powerfully. It's where the will geographically is located, just like Europe is the feeling region. And this, you could say Russia and the East has more to the thinking aspect of the earth. And just like thinking, feeling, and willing divide on the level of the individual, so does thinking, feeling, willing separate on the global level. And the fact that you had the destruction of Middle Europe, where Rudolf Steiner had been working with this Michaelic impulse, destroyed through the influence of Hitler and the Second World War, that weakened that middle heart region on the planetary level to such an extent that you had the Cold War, where will and thinking, East and West, were at war with each other. Cold War, but also hot wars, North Korea, South Korea, etc. And now we have a replay of that with China and US vying with each other. The East has a Luciferic double, the West has an Ahrimanic double, but through colonialism, the Ahrimanic has been introduced into the East. And so the East has its own Silicon Valley impulse. Taiwan is where most of the 2-3 nanometer chips are made, but Taiwan is sort of the crown jewel that China would like to get a hold of. And that, of course, will heavily impact this Pacific region where I'm at home. And so this has to do with studying etheric geography and realizing that Ahriman works more through the life ether and this chemical ether, where Lucifer works more in this realm of the light and the warmth ether. And so we have to learn to study the macrocosmic double with the help of Steiner's indications about the geographic double. So this was a picture I gave the last time. This was the ceiling of the Stuttgart building where Steiner worked with Freemasonic esoteric work. And I wanted to show there how this caduceus is pointing to Aquarius, which we're moving towards, the age of Aquarius. That's the sixth age we're meant to prepare. And for that, we need to balance the day and the night forces, the masculine and feminine forces. The capital that has to do with the Jupiter stage has this caduceus in it, these Mercury forces, these healing forces that Raphael represents. Rudolf Steiner worked with Ita Wegmann, the healing impulse. There was a bridge of the morning and evening forces there, the fall and the spring forces, the Michael and Raphael forces that we have to work with. And so Steiner didn't just work meditatively and teach Freemasonic thoughts. He embodied this inner work in ritual. And I've showed before how the Malzbau, which also was used for this type of work, had the seven capitals and pillars and the seven seals. Well, here you have the Tau, the T, having to do with the hammer of Hiram. You have the incense. So this ritual work had to do with the Rosicrucian impulse of preparing the sixth age. So Steiner here says, to begin with, Christianity is bound up with a purely materialistic culture of the fourth and fifth epochs, and the true Christianity of the future, which possesses the secret of the molten sea and the golden triangle, only exists secretly. This Christianity has another symbol, no longer that of the crucified Son of God, but the cross encircled with roses. This will become the symbol of a new Christianity of the sixth post-Atlantean epoch. Out of the mystery of the brotherhood of the Rose Cross will arise the Christianity of the sixth cultural epoch, which will recognize the significance of the molten sea and the golden triangle. The molten sea is what is created when the appropriate amounts of water and molten metal are cast. The three apprentices do it wrongly, and the casting is destroyed. But when the mysteries of fire are revealed to Hiram by Tubal-Cain, he is thereby enabled to unite water and fire in the proper way. This brings the molten sea into being. This is what the secret of the Rosicrucians is. It is brought about when the water of calm wisdom is united with the fire of the astral world, with the fire of passion and desire. A union must be brought about, which is of bronze, that is to say, is lasting and durable. It must endure into the next epoch when the secret of the sacred golden triangle is added to it, the secret of Atman, Buddhi, and Manas. This triangle, with all which it entails, will form the content of the renewed Christianity of the sixth cultural epoch that is being prepared by the Rosicrucians. And then what is symbolized by the molten sea will be united with the knowledge of reincarnation and karma. This is the new occult teaching, which will be united again with Christianity. The higher self of man, composed of Atman, Buddhi, and Manas, will become an open secret when the man of the sixth epoch has become ripe enough to receive it. Christian Rosenkreuz will then no longer be required to give warning, but everything which signifies strife on the outer plane will be resolved in peace through the molten sea and the secret of the golden triangle. And here one has the guardians of these mysteries that involve a meditation that Rudolf Steiner gave to Ita Wegman, where the red and the blue pillar are embodied in Rudolf Steiner and Christian Rosenkreuz as the guardian of this threshold into the new mysteries. And this is something to meditate on. And he gave this verse, which speaks of the seven spheres, the planetary spheres that are there also at the beginning of the book of Revelation, the stars around the hand of the being who opens the seals and overlights the churches as the seven angels, etc. And is surrounded by the seven golden candlesticks. So we have here something that you can work with meditatively on your own. And this is kind of a picture of this temple that has to do with entering between Joachim and Boaz, entering between the birth and the death mysteries. And there you have the three altars related to Manas, Buddhi, Atman. And these are really where the balancing of thinking, feeling, and willing, leading thinking over to wisdom, to Manas, feeling over to Buddhi, strength of will over to Atman. And there's a fourth altar in the north that has to do with the altar, that has to do with the mystery of midnight, the midnight sun, which is seen through the earth at Christmas. This is the higher mysteries that only was revealed to the higher grades of this Freemasonic work. But if you read the Temple Legend book by Rudolf Steiner and read the last lecture in that, where he speaks about the renewal of the royal art in our time, in the future, this is something we, I think, need to turn to, because Steiner had intended to not just give the first class, which he gave as the beginning of the esoteric school after the Christmas conference. He had intended the second class and the third class. He indicated privately to certain individuals that the third class would again involve the three altars, and that he would lead the third class himself. And so, because we have been deprived of the second and third class, I think we need to look back to this older esoteric wisdom that Steiner worked with in the esoteric school that really had to stop with the onset of the First World War. Let me then end with this last, having to do with the healing of the conflict with Cain and Abel, the summer way of Abel and the winter way of Cain. You need to be united in order to prepare that future sixth age. And at the heart and center of this is the mystery of the two Johns, which is what Steiner was speaking about during his very last address on September 28th, 1924. He was intending to give a second part, but was too ill. But it has to do with these two Johns. The one builds the triangle below, the other the triangle above. This can be seen as a kind of a Grail vessel. We need to bridge the heavenly and the earthly. And these aspects of the two Johns help to prepare this. So let me stop with that, since we've gone on quite long. I've kind of lost track of time.
Thank you so much, dear Florian. So I think it was great. I mean, it's just only 1 hour and 27 minutes.
Good.
Usually you're giving like 2-hour presentations, but now you're great. Yeah, I'm just wondering if you would like to have a couple of minutes break to restore your voice and have a sip of water.
Sure.
Because, yeah, let's do break. And so, dear friends, please bring your questions like in 2 or 3 minutes, and we will be back.
Or comments, or
yeah, statements. Yes. Okay. So, dear friends, so you know how to raise your hands, right? So, shall I explain again? It's react, a little icon right in the middle of your screen in the bottom. So, if you click, it's another button, raise hand. So, if you have any questions, so go ahead.
I put a question in the chat.
Well, you can speak. So, because we would like to hear it. Okay?
All right. For the work that anthroposophists should do now, is the number of anthroposophists in comparison to the world population now incarnated an issue?
Yeah, I think we got 7 point something billion people on the planet, and I think under 50,000 members of the Anthroposophical Society. So that's sort of a little like a potential homeopathic medicine kind of situation. And I think part of the problem is that the Anthroposophical Society underwent, after Rudolf Steiner's premature death, a kind of self-inflicted wound by having the Vorstand that Rudolf Steiner had inaugurated to renew the society, where he handpicked these individuals that right when the beast in 1933 came to power, and shortly thereafter in 1935, which was the same year that anthroposophy was suppressed in Germany, that the two of the women were ousted from the Vorstand. And not only these two women that Steiner had collaborated with, Elizabeth Vrede and especially Ita Wegman, but the whole Dutch society and the whole English society were also pushed out of the General Anthroposophical Society. This was a great tragedy. Rudolf Steiner had said that in the Michael school, which was a preparation for anthroposophy on the spiritual level by Michael before his new rulership in 1879, that there were millions of souls present. And one could ask, well, where are those millions? Well, I think part of what came about is this self-inflicted wound, where you had these divisions within the leadership that fractured the society at a very critical time when the adversarial forces were working very powerfully. And anthroposophy was the greatest threat, you could say, to the adversarial forces, because Michael is the countenance of Christ, and they were aware that the second coming was about to unfold in a way that could become accessible to human being. And so right at that same time when Steiner had spoken about that the Christ would begin to manifest himself in the etheric in 1933, you had Hitler show up. He's a being who's possessed by, you could say, the Luciferic. There's a nationalism, his ability as an artist to help create these colorful events. You had these great rallies where the choice of colors and the Hakenkreuz, which is related to the root chakra. You got an occult symbol there playing a role. And then, of course, the beginnings of media, the radio came on the scene. And he could then speak to the masses. And then I have a whole book on how IBM helped to the Hitler regime to create the ability to track all of the Jews in Germany and their businesses and all of this. And so already the beginnings of this artificial intelligence was playing a role. And of course, the atomic bomb was created partly out of fear that the Nazis were close to that, breakthrough, and that, prompted leading scientists to write a letter to the US president and gave birth to the Manhattan Project. So you had a major impulse, the mystery of evil, that Rudolf Steiner painstakingly was trying to wake anthroposophists up to. And then the leadership that was supposed to be the core of the society broke apart at that critical time when the adversary was there. So the Anthroposophical Society was tremendously weakened, which means then at the turn of the millennium, where anthroposophy was supposed to culminate, culmination was substantially weakened. And that turn of the millennium, Steiner indicated, would also be the beginning of a great battle for the future that was so important that leading anthroposophists would reincarnate to participate in this battle, which we're in the midst of right now. In response to a question in England as to when he would reincarnate, Steiner indicated in 80 years in America, which would be around the turn of the millennium. So the Platonists, the Aristotelians were meant to come together. That was part of a prearranged impulse to participate in this battle. That's all been substantially weakened. So I think we have to wake up now at this late hour to this great challenge, to do what we can to muster the courage and align to Michael. And I think because of that weakening of the merging of these two streams of the Platonists and the Aristotelians, I think this mystery of the two Johns is of core importance. And I think it's no accident that Steiner was giving that in his very last verbal speaking before he became too ill to speak. This being who wrote the book of Revelation, who wrote the Gospel of John, the Johannine Gospel, which is the most esoteric. So anyways, yes, I think that's a good question as to where things stand.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, thank you, Florian. So Richard, please.
There's several things, and there are many people who are on the side of Michael who are doing things unconsciously, and they're not aware of it, and that's fine. I happen to attend the First Baptist Church of Arlington, and I have communion one Sunday a week, and the pastor gets up and he says, whatever your beliefs are, please feel free to come and take communion at Christ's table. So he's opening it to everybody. So again, there are people who are doing things in an unconscious way, and as they are doing that, just support them as best we can. Yeah. Also, in regard to the swastika, okay, and the root chakra, okay, Rudolf Steiner's lectures and everything are filled with swastikas, but they are going clockwise, okay? Mm-hmm. And what Hitler does through the beast, he has it going anti-clockwise, which is, he converts a Christian symbol to an anti-Christian symbol. And finally, you know, people see this Baron von Koltitz meets with Hitler, and Hitler tells him to destroy Paris. And he says to himself, what am I listening to this man with the manners of a Bavarian peasant, you know, who speaks like a Bavarian peasant? telling me to destroy this city. How am I going to do this? So he disobeys his orders. So we are always at that particular choice also. Thank you.
Yeah, I think that's a good point with the swastika, an occult symbol that you find a lot in the Tibetan tradition, for example. And as you say, the perversion of it from clockwise to anti-clockwise, that's really the sign of being taken possession of from below, as opposed to just that individual of Hitler. He was being used as a kind of medium to influence people. It wasn't just him speaking after that possession, which they say began to take effect when he was gassed in the First World War and was blinded for a period. He underwent a change from that time on. And I think that this situation where, yes, there are many human beings who have goodwill, who have moral aspirations, and you can, go, for example, to a Catholic church and they have their rituals, even though those go back to the Third Age, and there's a tendency of the Catholic Church to still live in the Greco-Roman period. But individual human beings can counter that by waking up and embracing moral ideals that are embodied in Scripture, which is part of the sermons often. The ritual itself is a window into the spiritual world, whether it's baptism or the communion ritual, the rites to the dead, and the like, confirmation. Each of these were raised to a new level in the Christian community. And there you have more the able stream, the priestly stream, that in the Sixth Age, these two streams, the initiate, the more esoteric Christianity, which involved these uniting of these two streams. Steiner began that union by having the priests participate in the first class. And you have a situation now where you had Pope Francis having passed, and you have this new Pope from Chicago who's worked in Peru in the past and among the poor, and he's oriented to the workers. In his first address to the cardinals, he spoke of the great danger of artificial intelligence, which we've dealt with today as well from an anthroposophical perspective. And Pope Francis had already spoken about this danger as well in several of his talks in recent years. And we recently had a meeting here at of our council, and my wife shared a verse from Pope Francis that had to do with, I can't recall it all, but has to do with trees don't eat their own fruit, and the earth gives its bounty, and there's a certain selflessness involved in this. And we can, of course, enjoy our own life and bring meaning into it through spiritual orientation and learning from these plants, learning from nature. But what stands above of our own self enjoyment is to bring meaning into the lives of others. That was sort of the gist of his little verse. So I think we can learn from many individuals, and I'm sure there are individuals within churches, and whether it's, the Christian church, Hindu, Buddhist, Islam, there are people who find their way to the spiritual world by destiny. So we should be open to all of those. I know one of the special places in Egypt is a community where an anthroposophist who has a relationship to Islam has founded a kind of farming kind of initiative where they grow plants for Velleda, etc. And they have human, large gatherings. The father started it. He died. His son has taken over. But there's many, many people, and it's been working to spread influence in beyond their little farm, which has grown bigger and bigger. So even though Islam is often seen as representing the old moon religion, there is light shining there as well. And so I think I agree. And not all of these people are working unconsciously either.
Thank you very much. So Cameron, if you can unveil your face, it will be great. So if not, so.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yeah, yes, thank you.
Thank you so much, first, Florian. I really appreciate your discussions and your knowledge, sharing this deep knowledge of anthroposophy. It's really invigorating and really kind of helps to take some of the lessons that I've been learning over the years and taking it to the next level. So if you did this every week, I would listen in. So thank you so much again for sharing your deep knowledge of this subject. I guess I have two questions. One, could you speak a little bit more about the being that you spoke about as the Sorat? And also, would you mind explaining a little bit more of what you know of the Michael circle and how that might impact and influence kind of what's happening, in today's world, and how we can, be affected and work with that? Thank you.
And so with regards to Zorat, whose number is 666, and we hear about it in the 13th chapter that comes after the woman standing on the moon, crowned with the stars, clothed with the sun. And that's where the seventh trumpet is sounding. And that when Steiner speaks of Sorat, he's speaking of a being who didn't begin his evolution within this whole cycle of human planetary evolution, which began with old Saturn, then old Sun, old Moon, and then the Earth period we're in, and leading over to the future Jupiter, the New Jerusalem, and then Venus and Vulcan stages beyond that. That this is a being who has an evolution from beyond that time and works in opposition to the Christ being. And in close connection with the mentioning of this sun demon, Steiner speaks of then the 666 cycle. And this will play a role far into the future, but it's already begun to play a role in this period leading up to our present time. So the first intervention of Sorat, the sun demon, was in the year around 666. And when Steiner talks about these time periods. It's more like an epicenter in time, just like when you have an earthquake. The earthquake is centered somewhere, but it spreads out in all directions, you could say. So this is kind of the equivalent of an earthquake in time. So that means we have to look to the period before the year 666, as well as after the year 666, to get the full impression of the first round, let's say, of the appearance of the sun demon Zorat, whose number is 666. Steiner gives some indications of how one can decipher that number 666, having to do with the Kabbalistic understanding that each number is related to a Hebrew alphabet letter. And it's quite elaborate, so I'm not going to go into that here. One can find that in his 1908 course on the Apocalypse in Nuremberg, and also in the priest lecture cycle. So the middle of the fourth post-Atlantean age. Now, the center of the whole Earth evolution was the Atlantean period. So after the middle of the Atlantean, we then move into a period where the death forces will continue to get stronger. And after, when the post-Atlantean period happens, all of these sevenfold rhythms culminate in a crisis. So the crisis back then is often called the Great Flood, the Ice Age in terms of science. And the ripest fruit of that cycle of the Atlantean period was the Fifth Age. So human beings from the fifth period were the ripest. They were then later via Ireland by this Manu led down to the Gobi region, where he founded a center that inaugurated the post-Atlantean epoch, having brought with him the ether body replicas of the holy rishis who had played a role in the mystery centers of the Atlantean period. But we have the Atlantean period is divided into 7 periods, and each of them have to do with a different race aspect. And theosophy is very much still too much focused on the race element in later periods, but it really belongs to this Atlantean period. And so you have the 7 root races are related to the 7-headed dragon that appears later, that threatens the child, and etc. That's more the Luciferic dragon that was cast down and awakened human intelligence. But the 666 enters the first time in the Greco-Latin period, which began in 747 BC, ended in 1413 AD, and the middle of it is the year 333. The Christ was destined to appear 333 years later in the year 0 through the birth of Jesus. Then, of course, there's, the 30 years, then the baptism, the 3 years. And the picture is that the Christ, I think I didn't phrase it quite right. So the Christ came if the middle of the Atlantean period is repeated in the Greco-Latin, and the middle of the Greco-Latin as 333, then the Christ anticipated the sun demon coming in 666. So he came 333 years earlier, and to counterbalance what was coming through the sun demon in around 666, which appeared then through Gundi Shapur, which is where certain Greek and Persian initiates took refuge. And they had a school there that had some esoteric Christian components, but a lot of Eastern influence was there as well. And the sun demon and Ahriman also preys on people of intelligence, especially if there's pride, the Luciferic element of intelligence, that makes intelligent people vulnerable to Ahriman. And the sun demon is, you could say, among the most powerful Ahrimanic beings in our universe. So there's a kinship between Sorat and Ahriman. And the second half of evolution will be dominated by Ahriman becoming ever stronger. Ahriman has its rightful place in the mineral kingdom, and he rules over the death forces. He's also called the Lord of Lies. He's closely related to Mammon, the Lord of Money. He's obsessed with numbers. That's why he loves algorithms. And he works with duality, like the computer is on and off. Algorithms are based on that on and off. But we're moving towards quantum computing, which is a different form of computing that is more complex using qubits, etc. So to me, that's a reflection of the eighth sphere. It's kind of a unusual ghostly realm, this realm that the physicists spoke about as the quantum realm, the spooky realm of interactions at a distance and all of this. We're bringing that down into our computer system. Huge amounts of money are being put into this, both in China and America. But this sun demon wants to take the place of the Christ being and works through the unholy trinity of the Azuric beings, the Ahrimanic beings, and the Luciferic beings. And so when later we see Hitler come into play, you have a Luciferic dimension, as I was saying, with these rallies. He had this he was a failed artist in a certain respect. But he had also this strongly Ahrimanic sort of hatred and this alignment to the negative Mars forces of war and destruction. And the Azuric beings also played a role in the Nazi regime. When you torture people and you take pleasure in them, that's the beginning of black magic. So the Zorat being is connected with black magic. And so the second attack of Zorat was in 1332, I believe it is twice 666. That's when Philip le Bel, who was a king of France at the time, it was a period where history sometimes speak of the Babylonian captivity of the papistry, because Pope Clement V, I think it was, had been kind of installed under pressure by Philip le Bel, and the papistry was shifted from Rome to Avignon, France. So the king had a certain leverage over the Pope, and the previous Pope had only lived for a short time. And he was kind of pushed over the edge by the influence, the ruthless influence of Philip le Bel and his henchmen. One of his henchmen was the leader of his secret police. And that person was, you could say, had occult faculties. And they had invited the Knights Templars to France for a celebration of a wedding. It's as though they were made to feel as great guests to this special occasion. But Philip le Bel all along wanted the treasures and the riches of the Templars, and he wanted some of their power because he had witnessed when he devalued the currency, there were uprising in the streets, and he was threatened and took refuge in the stronghold of the Templars in Paris. And he was able to witness their treasury there. And he is someone who has a relationship to the dark side of gold. He has a former incarnation in the Mexican mysteries, which related to the dark side of the sun forces. And so you had, you could say, Zorat also working at the time when the mystery of Golgotha was working through a black magician who was active in South America, in the Mexican region, as a black magician. And that black magician was crucified in conjunction with the mystery of Golgotha by a white magician and banished then for a period of time. And so you have this demon, sun demon, working through black magic. And black magic, the ABCs are cutting into flesh and not feeling the pain, but actually learning to enjoy this. So you pervert the Kamaloka period through this. And Kamaloka, as you know, takes place after death in the astral sphere, where you go back over your life in reverse and you feel the pain and suffering that you inflicted on others. And out of that, you develop your own karma. But if you learn to take pleasure in pain, as these ABCs of black magic, then you invert that process. And instead of ascending towards the moon gate into the lower heavens, you go down into the interior of the earth, which are the hell regions of the earth. And there's 9 layers. And Zorat seeks to usurp the power of Christ at the center of the earth. He seeks to create the center of the earth as his organ. That's where the Christ descended through the mystery of Golgotha. He's descended through those 9 layers and established his throne at the center of the earth. But at the center of the earth is a battle for who is the ego of the earth, the Christ or this Antichrist. So you have in the 9 layers of the earth, the top layers are the inverted aspect of the Holy Spirit, the middle layers, the inverted aspect of the sun principle. Ahriman has his home within the earth in the 6th layer where volcanism arises from. And then the last 3 layers have to do with the inversion of the Father God, having to do with the inversion of the first hierarchy, seraphim, cherubim, and thrones. So the redemption of evil was begun through the Christ and through this mystery of Golgotha descending, and the earth etheric aura that the Christ brought from the sun shines from the center of the earth. And I've tried to point to the center of the earth is the macrocosmic counterpart to what the pineal gland is in our heads. The pineal gland is like the stone that fell out of Lucifer's crown. And through compassion, which at first Parsifal didn't have when he entered the Grail castle the first time, he didn't ask the question of what ails thee. But once we ask that question, like Parsifal did later on when he entered the second time, we carve out that hard stone of the ego, which is the gift of Lucifer. And then it becomes the chalice into which the blood of Christ can be received. And that's what the mystery of the etherized blood is about, is there's a lemniscate between head and heart, between the pineal gland and the heart. And once this etheric heart that builds a bridge to the pineal gland is received through creating this Grail vessel in the pineal gland, then that organ can begin to shine. And that's related to the day-night rhythm. But on the level of the whole earth, this center of the earth is related to the macrocosmic counterpart to the morning and evening forces, which are related to Pisces and Virgo. And that is spring and fall, Easter and Michaelmas. And if we learn to celebrate these festivals in the right way, where we work with Michael and Raphael, then we can, at the same time that we work with the morning and evening forces in the rhythm of the day-night, we can help the Christ power to grow, and this sun at the center of the earth that Christ brought can shine more powerfully. That's the way to fight with the sun demon, because then this Shambhala that's rising through the expanding aura of the earth, which contains the resurrected thoughts of the Christ overcoming death the second time in the etheric. And the angels then can come to us and minister unto us. So that's what we're in. We're in the age of the Holy Spirit, which requires this wings of the eagle. We have to raise our thinking to the higher level, that philosophy of freedom. And that little quote of the communion of man is really when we lead thinking into this higher sphere. So the third attack of the sun demon is 1998. That's 3 times 666. And Rudolf Steiner said this would be the strongest. And he was more hidden in the first 666 and the second. In the third, he comes more into the open. And there will be many human beings who embody physically and are possessed by this sun demon. And Steiner indicated that there will be not just embody him in the inner life, but even their features will manifest this hate and angry, destructive force that he inspires. And so the Michael school was being celebrated in the spiritual world from about the 15th century onward. Ahriman became so concerned that he created a Ahrimanic counter school. And just like that Michael school prepared for anthroposophy, this counter Ahrimanic school prepared for the incarnation of Ahriman and also the intervention of the sun demon. So many of these people who are celebrating Subnature out of Silicon Valley, who are standing behind the US president in his inauguration, these billionaires who've made their money off of Subnature, I would say that these are people who attended that Ahrimanic school. And this would include the founders of Google and Zuckerberg and the Amazon founder Bezos, among others. So these are then earthly human beings who are in the service of these Ahrimanic influences. And as I say, there are certain authors who speak about the birth of Ahriman in close connection with the third 666, like 1999, for example, one author from anthroposophical viewpoint, another one around that same period, a little later. speaks of the birth of the vessel, the vehicle for Ahriman. And that, some then speak of 2033 and the like, just like the Christ enters at the year 30, that Ahriman will incorporate, and through Ahriman will work then, of course, also the sun demon. But Lucifer's karma is Ahriman. So at first, this being who's the vessel for the Ahriman incarnation, which is the mini Antichrist in the service of the great Antichrist, which is Zorat, will first appear with Luciferic aura, be someone who's able to give the impression he's a religiously oriented person, just like we hear of the two-horned beast, looks like a lamb, but he speaks like a dragon. How do we know how he speaks like a dragon? Well, he lies left and right is the way to tell, because Ahriman is the Lord of lies. And Rudolf Steiner indicated around the same time he spoke of the coming incarnation of Ahriman in 1919 in about 7 different lectures. He gave a lecture on the problem of education, I think it's called. And one of the early lectures there, he speaks of one of the reasons that the modern day initiate, the true initiates, are very earnest and concerned and have a kind of worry about the future, is that they know that it's inevitable that intelligence will become evil. And the only way to counter that, he was speaking to people who would become teachers in the Waldorf movement, was for teachers to teach in such a way that at some point in that child's biography, they would be able to undergo a second birth that is made possible by what the Christ gave to humanity through the mystery of Golgotha. That was implanted in every human being as a seed potential. But how to awaken it, that's what the Waldorf teacher was called to do, because that's what's necessary. And so when you ask about the youth circle, this was given by Rudolf Steiner a little before the Christmas conference. And it started out with a group of 12 individuals. And they came to Steiner and asked, how can we align to the being of Michael? And he then gave several lectures specifically to them. One could call them esoteric lectures. And just like he gave certain lectures to the Christian community, and for a long time, they kept like that Apocalypse course to themselves. You couldn't get a hold of it. The same was the case with the youth circle material. You had to be invited into that circle. And then there was a little ritual that you went through. I joined that circle many years ago. I was asked to join it. And you're then given certain meditations, a morning meditation, a midday meditation, and an evening meditation. And the meditation is really meant to unite yourself with these others. And he spoke about how these young people needed to develop not just ordinary intelligence, but super intelligence, because this was going to be needed to counter the Ahrimanic forces that were coming and to align to Michael. But as with most everything that Rudolf Steiner spoke, it's been now published and available. So the youth circle material is available in one of the, I think it's 266 something course, one of those esoteric volumes. that has the youth. It has to do with the late years of 22, 23, esoteric school before the first class. And so I think that's sort of something valuable, because again, we need to reach young people in our time. Young people represent the future. The young people are under attack. And from an early age, they're being called into, it's like Bill Gates last week said, in 10 years, most teachers will be AI. Most doctors will be AI. And just like Zuckerberg said, well, all these lonely people, to give them bots to fall in love with. That's what's happening to young people. So the Manichaean impulse will outlast the Rosicrucian impulse in human evolution, Rudolf Steiner pointed out, because it goes back to Mani. Mani is the leading initiate of our time. He's the being who appeared as Parsival. He's the being who appeared as Mani. He will take over the leadership of the White Lodge in the beginning of the sixth epoch, which Rosicrucianism is preparing. The higher grades of Rosicrucian initiation were bestowed by Mani and have to do with dealing with the mystery of good and evil. So they, in the Manichaean stream, you seek to transform evil into good. You don't, you have to overcome the fear of evil. So healing is an important Manichaean impulse. The movement of Camp Hill, for example, they saw themselves as taking on a Manichaean task. Bernard Leavegood spoke of this. But it's also the farmers, you know, the biodynamic farmers are meant to give medicine to the earth, to heal the earth. They're meant to witness the elemental beings that inhabit the etheric. If we don't reach out to these elemental beings, then they become like orcs under Saruman, or, you know, Lord of the Rings, Sauron, who has this army of orcs, which are subhuman. The subnature forces are peopled by these beings who live in the etheric, and we need to redeem them. So we need a new technology in the future. Steiner gave a key to it in his Strader figure in the mystery plays. We need a moral technology. We can't go back and escape from technology. We have to create a new technology. A technology without morality is leading us away from the goal that we have in the future. So this moral technology is an important theme that Steiner spoke of in that last lecture, the renewal of the royal art, learning to wield this hammer that's used to create the brazen sea. This is the hammer of the Tao forces that were known in the Atlantean time. You could say the Chinese inherited some of that. They still had echoes of the Tao wisdom. But we have to renew that Tao wisdom. And the building of the Goetheanum was a Tao deed. The secrets of the new Taoism are embodied in the Goetheanum and its architecture. So anyways, that's going around about your questions.
Yeah, thank you very much, Florian. It was a very short answer.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, so Yaya is next. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you so much, Florian. I'm always astounded by the vastness and depth of your knowledge. It's incredible and very humbling. I would like to contribute, if I may, with 3 points. One is relating to your mention of Hitler. who entrusted the Ministry of Propaganda in giving every single German family in Germany a radio set, which was so devised as to receive only a sort of FM system of radio, localized, so that they could hear, every family was in a way forced to hear the messages of the Ministry of Propaganda and of Hitler, but not able to access radio waves coming from abroad. And in a way, there is a similarity, I think, with what the policies are nowadays about computers and internet. I remember an ex-prime minister of Great Britain, maybe a decade, no, more than a decade ago, maybe 20 years ago, who said every child should have a computer and access to the internet. The result is very, very similar. There is a lowering of consciousness, the lowering of the ability to learn to think. It subdues the use of these technologies when it is indiscriminate, subdues the ability to discern what is a lie and what is the truth, because we are all flattened out with input which is decided by technology itself and the people in charge of technology. The second point I wanted to make is about the millions that took part in the Michael spiritual science school in the spiritual realm. And I have asked myself very often the question, where are these millions? And I came to the conclusion, and it's only limited and personal, that possibly as a consequence of the division within the society in the 30s, people that were incarnating and possibly predestined to become anthroposophists became reluctant to join the anthroposophical movement and society. So unconsciously, they are still very much anthroposophists, but they're not members of the society. But this is, again, as I say, my personal way of perceiving this problem. And then there was a mention and also a slide on Lucifer and Lucifer's connection to racism, well, to races, which translates nowadays in a unfortunate hate and racism, which is expanding instead of retracting. We should go towards overcoming racism, but we see and witness regularly the going backward towards making the race the most important aspect of one's life and of one's incarnation. I'm sorry, I haven't fully elaborated on this, so I'm only offering a scattered thoughts, but the resolution of racism could be in the hands of women. And I say so not gratuitously, but by taking a historical example. Maybe 30 years ago, there was a movement started in Israel, Palestine, of women that marched together, both Israeli women and Palestinian women. And they were marching together through the deserts and through all sorts of villages and places, not preaching, but showing that it is possible to do something together. So this togetherness reminds me of the bridges which have been mentioned even by the new Pope. The late Pope often said, if there is a problem, give it to women and they'll solve it. The new Pope says, that there is a necessity of building bridges, but doesn't mention any women. In fact, he hasn't mentioned the possible expansion of the role of women in the church, which might be of concern. But the building of bridges is down to the goodwill of people who have recognized within themselves the Christ impulse, whether they call it that or whether they call it whatever else, it doesn't really matter to me. But the recognition of the impulse that humanity is a whole and not divided is the way forward, hopefully. Thank you. Thank you so much, Florian.
Thank you. I think all of what you were mentioning is important. I know, China, the Soviet Union, which was sort of behind the Iron Curtain, and now Russia, which has become an authoritarian state under Putin for quite some time, where propaganda is dominant in the media. You're not allowed to bring up dissent. Even holding up a sign that has nothing on it is bad. People can get jailed. It's like that ballerina lady who just got freed, who had given, what is it, $45 or something to the Ukrainians or something, and was arrested and was supposed to get 7 years or something like that in jail. And then, of course, in China, the Tiananmen Square, where there was some hope, young people and others who tried to embrace freedom, was very brutally suppressed. And you have the most advanced surveillance society, and they have like a triple firewall that keeps foreign news out that they don't want their citizens to hear, and they kind of twist the arm of platform providers to follow suit in their countries if they want to work there. And so you have young people in these countries brought up with information that's basically propaganda, and any dissent, because the surveillance is so widespread with the help of AI, cameras all over the place. Internet is being, watched, what you're sharing on your account. Certain keywords will, raise, the regime's kind of people who are in charge of keeping people enclosed in that bubble of propaganda. And towards the end of this last election, you heard the new administration that was coming in was talking about the enemy within. And so now there's retribution going after the lawyer firms that were involved in prosecutions. Certain news outlets are being sued and taken to court. And so the enemy within also means surveillance, to catch all these immigrants that they want to deport. Obviously, we're dependent on many of them. They help to keep the plants growing in hot climates where nobody else wants to work, like in some of those hot places in California. But anyways, treating human beings where they're not human because they're a different race, because they have a different hereditary background, a different skin color, that all goes against the Michaelic impulse, which is cosmopolitan, to create a new world culture that's meant to emerge, that creates a new understanding of what is universally human, to discover what it is our commonalities as opposed to our differences? What are our common longings, morally, ethically, individually? And to write stories, to write poems, to create new myths around this new culture that needs to emerge. That's sort of a creative endeavor that we're challenged with. But as Steiner points out, Ahriman most of all hates the spiritual cultural sphere, especially when it's embodied in something like spiritual science. It's a tremendous threat. Steiner says it burns him like a fire, and he wants to get rid of it. So you could say the Second World War was a way of turning back the clock on a lot of what Rudolf Steiner, in the service of Michael and other anthroposophists in Christian community, had done in Middle Europe. And by shutting down the Anthroposophical Society in Germany, where the largest membership, confiscating libraries, closing Waldorf schools, arresting Christian community priests, this set back the Michael impulse tremendously. So you can see how strong these adversarial forces are. And this picture that before we can witness the Christ, we have to witness the beast. Well, the beast was the one who created all that havoc. But the beast, the two-horned beast, is working through the Hitler individuality. And this thing of creating these factories that could kill people and giving them impression that it was a shower they were going to take when in fact it was a gas chamber, and telling them they were going to be taken to the country to farm the land out there. Instead, they were taken to concentration camps, and all that was hidden away. Even the German people were not very well aware unless they lived very close to some of these facilities. And the Americans were hesitant to share all of the photos and pictures, and because it was so ugly, that it was sort of difficult for people to bear. So facing the mystery of evil is very, very challenging. And I agree that, many people who had partaken of the Michael school, because of these divisions in the Anthroposophical Society, didn't take out the membership when they nevertheless were by karma oriented to that. And that's, again, this self-inflicted wound that the society created. And so once Rudolf Steiner was pushed across the threshold, I use that term because he came under attack with the burning of the Goetheanum that impacted his health detrimentally, and then the poisoning the following year. And then he disclosed to Ita Wegman that he was under constant spiritual attack ever since he criticized the Jesuits in From Jesus to Christ lecture cycle. He says that's when the attacks began, but they picked up more and more as he shared more and more. And he said that these groups had infiltrated the society, and that he sought to work counter to them by having women in the Vorstand. But the fact that women got pushed out later, first the 2 in 35, and then Marie Steiner came under attack later as well, that shows that these backward brotherhoods gained an influence within the Anthroposophical Society itself. But they work in an occult manner. The Jesuits work through the will, which is the most unconscious part of our being. And so anyways, we're dealing with occult forces. That's why we need occult knowledge. And as you say, the intuition that ever since we have the whole Earth picture from outer space, it's like become an icon of the new Gaia theory, that sees the environmental crisis as a global situation. And I think this unity, this picture of humanity as a species, as opposed to ethnic and racial and national, that's what we have to discover. This, what is the essentially human? And that's where the I am that the Christ being bestowed on humanity, that's what's threatened with the racism and all these divisions. And that was, you know, in the Bolshevik Revolution, it was the elite, intelligentsia, the aristocrats that were under attack because it appealed to the working class and generated this hatred for them. So a lot of them were sent into Gulag, or their goods were confiscated. And of course, Stalin rivaled Hitler in his atrocities. And Steiner spoke of the danger of that mentality spreading. And the left-leaning political lent towards Marxism. Marx was an atheist. Lenin was helped by the Germans to go on a sealed train with his compatriots and relatives into Russia at a key time. And Trotsky was helped by the Canadians, the British, to get into Russia at a key time that helped to trigger the Bolshevik Revolution. Certain American elite brotherhoods came to Russia in the guise of Red Cross representatives with huge amounts of money, and gave it to all of the left-leaning parties. To matter who, when, they had all the candidates covered, so to speak. And they were owed favors by that new regime, because these wealthy people, and that's how the Freemasons especially work, through the finance system, like JP Morgan and that whole group, they work through money, God Mammon, so to speak, and they use wealth to influence the state. And so the Federal Reserve System is kind of an occult organization, and the dollar has ruled for a long time. But now we're in a critical point where what's been in place for 80 years since the end of the World War II, 1945, which ended in the atomic weapons being unleashed. We had NATO and the American Atlantic Alliance. That's all falling apart now. And we're having a situation where you got isolationism setting in America. And you got, again, this division between former allies, and it's again national, racial, ethnic components involved. So this longing for one humanity, one earth, one solar system, one higher self, there are strong forces working against that. So, and behind them are occult forces. So we need the youth circle, we need the Michael Christ impulse more than ever. And so that's something we have to help each other with, how to strengthen that connection. And I think the mystery of the two Johns is an important path. The Gospel of John, the Book of Revelation. That doesn't mean the other Gospels aren't important, but this Book of Revelation is a key to the apocalyptic nature of our time, because unlike the Fourth Age, which was a recapitulation of the Atlantean period, the Fifth Age is a prophetic anticipation of the future New Jerusalem. And that's what makes our time apocalyptic, according to Steiner. So in order to counter that, we need an initiation science, he says. And that's the new mysteries that were opened up at the Christmas conference. And the foundation stone meditation is a part of that. And the FM work was a part of that. So I'll leave it at that, but I think those are important questions and comments.
Thank you, Florian.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. So there's questions from Brenda.
Yes,
We can make it the last question for our session.
okay. Thank you, Florian. I hope you can hear me. I just have a comment. One of the things I've noticed is that the use of Christian symbols in the United States among this new administration for political purposes. Everybody is wearing a cross. Everyone. I mean, Trump hasn't put one on now, but there's all the women have crosses, the news people, you know, it's just, but they're not Christian. They are not Christian in terms of how they're behaving. They're using it essentially for politics. And I find that very, very frightening now. So that was my comment. Thank you, Florian.
That's one of the preparations for the incarnation of Ahriman. In these lectures that Steiner gave in 1919, where he spoke of this upcoming incarnation in the West, in America, is where most people expect that, because that's where the Ahrimanic double forces are strongest and the subnature forces are strongest. And that the various ways that Ahriman uses to prepare his incarnation is to spread materialism, to spread modern science, to keep science and religion apart rather than bridging them. And those human beings who are the servants of Ahriman, these backward occultists, they bridge science and religion, but they keep that occult knowledge to themselves for the sake of power. And that another way that Ahriman prepares his incarnation is to project that materialism into the heavens, to spread materialism around the whole planet, but to keep the peoples in Asia, in the third world, etc., in their old world religions, but to harden religions, to rigidify religion, to rigidify Christianity, to create a caricature of Christianity, to basically turn Christianity into a caricature, a counterfeit. This is one of the ways. Otherwise, you wouldn't have this Antichrist aspect of the incarnation of Ahriman. You wouldn't have this Luciferic aura that Ahriman initially puts out like a wolf in sheep's clothing. Because just like I was talking about Marxism and materialism, there is no moral ground there. That's why, we're not, there's no moral constraints. The 60s threw off the old morality. And there were a lot of moral dictates around gender and marriage and all of that. All of that was thrown out. LGBTQ plus is an expression of throwing out the old morality. And that's sort of the Luciferic. The drugs were involved as well, another Luciferic aspect. The hippie movement was very much involved in that. But at the same time, there was a community impulse. At the same time, there was a Christ impulse wanting to come in. But then on the right wing, which is on the rise in many places, and here the contribution about women plays a role, is the charge of the right wing is led by men. There's more men now becoming religious, quote unquote, whether it's Christian or whatever, but it's a caricature. It at the same time is married to racism, and you've got this caricature of wealth and Christianity. You know, you've got in the Bible this thing of it's easier for a camel to pass through a needle's eye than a rich man to come to heaven. And there was a gate in Jerusalem called the Needle Gate, where it was small to where when you came with a camel, you couldn't get through if you had too many pack sacks hanging down either side, so to speak. And so these days they have prosperity gospel. It's like the woman who's installed in the White House as the faith advisor. Her last name is White. And if you listen to some of her ranting and raving, it's amazing. But it's dealing with spirits. She's calling spirits in. And, you know, she has her own jet. She's one of these Christians who decides that that is an expression of God loves you. He's blessing you with all this wealth. And so she's the faith advisor. And I'd say anyone who's an anthroposophist should look into that biography of that individual, because it's a key to some of what's going on at the present, because we always need to be awake and watchful in the present, because that's where the battle, where we can do something about it is. And there's a lot of, the Ahriman is counting on putting us to sleep. The media tends to put us to sleep. We need moral imaginations, but we are mesmerized by TVs and screens, and our kids are being led away by the Pied Piper. That's all techno magic. And, you know, Elon Musk, who wants to take us to Mars, that's a nail in the coffin of Sophia. Steiner indicated there's a counterpart to the old myth of Osiris being killed in the old Egyptian era. We're, in a certain respect, recapitulating that Egyptian era, which is the third epoch in our fifth. And he says now there is the death of Sophia, and she's been killed through the projecting of materialism onto the cosmos. So you have Elon Musk, who helped to get the new president elected with his billions of dollars and is jumping up and down on the stage, the richest man on the earth. He wants to get us to Mars as soon as possible. He's influencing NASA to get going even next year, perhaps, to Mars. But what is Mars? Mars is where the god of war was at home. It's related to the masculine double. And that's where Buddha was sent with the help of Christian Rosenkreuz to bring peace, like Christ did through the mystery of Golgotha on the earth, to enact something similar on Mars. But here we have an administration that wants to, on the one hand, celebrate Christianity, but on the other is killing the Sophia, who is hidden behind the stars. And the veil of icy Sophia has to be lifted. The new frontier isn't outer space. It isn't aliens. It's the spiritual hidden behind the stars. All the light that shines towards us is cosmic intelligence of one sort or another. And the sun is related to the earth, like heart to head, and the moon is like the cerebellum. And so we, in order to create a connection to Christ, we need this new cosmology. We need to look to the heavens and once again lift the veil and see the Sophia being, that all of those stars are the cosmic astral garment of the Sophia that has to be lifted. In the Isis Sophia lectures that Steiner gave, he spoke about how it's not the Christ we're missing. That's there. Nobody can prevent that. We can maybe prevent human beings from witnessing it, but we can't prevent it from happening. But we need the Sophia. That's what we're missing, the wisdom of Christ. As more we absorb anthroposophy, which is the wisdom of Sophia, the more it awakens in us the capacity to give birth to the Christ impulse within ourselves and see the Christ in the other. And that's where then two or three are gathered is the path forward. We have to create community starting on a small level with those who are close to us on a soul spiritual level that have a certain spiritual kinship, and create these little Grail circles, these little sun circles. And then as the promise went, those who gather in my name, I'm in their midst. And I am with you always, even till the end of the ages. So that instead of a Elon Musk dish to receive the internet, we need to create this Grail vessel within small circles. And that's how we create little oases in a desert of materialism.
And yeah, thank you so much for your questions and for answers from Florian. So is it time to conclude? Yeah. So thank you again, dear friends. Please feel free and mute your devices, and say thank you to Florian. And Florian, are we expecting one more part, or what do you think?
Yeah, there's definitely more to cover that I would like to work with in the future.
Thank you so much, and give us advance notice so we're sure we're available.
Okay.
I know Florian, he is preparing one more. I'm not sure when. I mean, do you think it's going to be this month, or?
I probably could use a month to get, I have also, I have a presentation that I'm going to be involved with Mystec in the summer. So the theme there is the challenge of facing Ahriman. And so that's one of the reasons I'm working towards that theme in these presentations.
Yeah. So dear friends, so I would like to invite you also in 1 week, in the same time on Saturday, will be presentation of our dear friend Andrew Linnell and a friend from Great Britain. It's Paul Levy. So also on artificial intellect. So it will be two presentations, this 1 week apart. So 2 Saturdays. So please take a part of it. So yeah, thank you again, and I'll see you next time.
Thank you.
Thank you, Florian, and thank you, Andre.
All the best.